Hi there. Today we're going to start looking at some of the basics of Foundation for emails. So to get started, we're going to go ahead and go to foundation.zurb.com/emails to go ahead and get started and download some of the template. So once you land on the Foundation homepage, you're just going to click that great big button that says Get Started. And when you click on that, it says you've got two ways. So for these videos and for this tutorial, we are going to work with the CSS version because the CSS version, it does require a lot more HTML, so there's a lot more nesting tables to go with it. The Sass version is a lot more streamlined. It works with inky tags. It is a little bit more in depth as far as having more advanced coding knowledge. It also requires Node.js to work. It also requires a kind of a GitHub repository. So we're just going to keep it real simple and use basic CSS. So we're going to download this version. So you're going to click the Download the Starter Kit button. So go ahead and click on that. It's going to go ahead and download a zip file for you. And you're going to locate that in your Downloads folder. So within the Downloads, that Foundation Starter Kit, you're going to see that by default it's going to give you some templates. So some of the templates that it gives you already has a lot of these basic things that you can simply kind of plug and chug with the code and change out the information, add in your own information. This is all really, really basic stuff, but it's already ready to go. So here's some of the different eBlasts that come with it. So you can just pop in your own pictures, change out your text, and you're ready to go. We're going to work with the basic blank file in there. So once you've got your starter kit downloaded, go ahead and open up that index.html. I'm going to use brackets to work with mine. You can use whatever HTML editor that you would like. I'm just going to go ahead and open that in brackets. And now you can see this is the basic starter template that we're going to work with. There's nothing really that exists in here. So let me hit my live preview. And you see that it's simply a blank page. So we're going to start with a blank document just to get an idea of how some of the different Foundation tags work in building your basic email. So also in your starter kit files that you download off of Zurb, you'll see we have a CSS folder. And there's two CSS files within there. The one we are going to work with is the foundation/emails.css. So I'm going to go ahead and open that up in brackets as well, so that way you can see what that looks like. So this is the basic template of all the CSS that is already plugged into your index here. You can see right here, here's the CSS reference. It's referencing this style sheet. So if there are basics that you want to change within that CSS, there's certain padding that you may want to adjust, link color, things like that, you can go ahead and adjust that here and it will plunk right into your index. You can also link an additional style sheet, but beware that this is where the boilerplate stuff is already set. So certain things like link colors, you just want to reset it here. Otherwise, if you create an additional CSS document and you are adjusting the basic stuff like the table paddings and the columns and the rows, you may get unexpected results because you're writing two different CSS rules. So just be aware of that it's worth scrolling through and reading. Here is all the CSS within that framework. So, and it has all of our different responsive items to it as well. You'll see it's got some media queries, a lot of the padding, a whole lot of padding, text, different text stylings and things like that. So we're going to jump back into our index.html and we're just going to work within this for this first video. We're going to build our actual eBlast in another video. I'm just going to walk you through some of the basics. So let's talk about the basic grid structure within Foundations. So Foundation for Emails has a lot of the common elements that you need within really any framework. So the basic grid It's got basic typography, basic styles, buttons, callouts, and things like that. So there are the first three basic things for creating and structuring your email is you have to work with a container, then you have to work with a row, and then you have to work with columns. So everything must sit inside a container, and then it has to have table rows and table data. So that's your real basic of all of that. So I'm going to go ahead and work inside this center tag, and I'm going to first build my container. So I'm going to start with my table, and I'm going to give that a class of container. So then within that table, my stuff up, I'm going to create a new table row. Within my table row, I create my table data tag. So that's your basic structure of any other table you've ever had to create within HTML. So the container is going to wrap around the body of your entire email. So everything needs to sit inside this container. So at the end of this table tag, I'm just going to comment it out just to keep myself organized. You're going to see you're going to get a lot of HTML really quickly when working with this. So I'm going to just write end of container just so I know when I'm working where my container ends. It's always a good idea to comment out where things start and stop. All right, so within this, I'm going to start creating my row. So I've got my container, so I need to start working within that row. So within this table data, I'm going to create a new table. I'm going to give it a class of row. Open that up a little bit to work inside of it. I'm going to create my table row. Within there, I'm going to create my table head. And open that up so I can work within there. And then inside of this row, I'm going to create my, I've got my table head here. I'm going to give my table head a class of small 12 and then large 6. And then this is going to read first columns. Oops, I have to spell columns correctly. Spelling is important. And then I'm going to just simply write column 1 so I can see it. And then after that, I'm going to create simply a little expander. So I'm going to create a new table head tag, and I'm going to give that a class of expander. Go. Let me save that. And then I can see here on my test email, I've got one column of text. So what some of this basic is with these classes is I've created a row, because within a container you must have a row, and I've simply said, okay, I'm going to have a one column design. So rather than having multiple columns line up, I have one column, and that at the small size it's going to take up 12 of my columns within there, and a large size it's going to take up half of that space. Since it's first, it's going to be left aligned. So that's what those basic tags mean. All that documentation for some of these tags is on the Zurb website. Since the first column we made is half width, so you see we've got large 6, so that means at this large size that this column is going to be only half of the width. We're going to need another column to go next to it. So after the table head for this, we're going to insert another column here. So after this ends, I'm going to just create another line down. I'm going to create another table head tag, and within there I'm going to give it that same class. So class is equal to small 12, large 6. And then instead of being first, it's going to be last. So that way it will align more to the right. And then columns. And I'm going to set that to being column 2. Save that, and you can see that popped in my second column of text. So that's at the large size. Now if I shrink this down to a small size, so on a small screen you see now it's stacked. So at that small size they're going to stack. This column is going to take up the full 12 columns of the framework by default, and these frameworks work in a 12 column grid. So at the small size 12 columns, at the large size 6. So 6 and 6 being 12, and that's how these will stack. So that way this email is already going to be responsive to a mobile framework or to a mobile device. Okay, so we have just done a basic 2-column layout in our eBlast design. So I'm going to show you how to do a slightly more complicated 3-column layout within our design. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new row. So after this first row that I just created for our 2 columns, I'm going to go ahead and comment out the end of this container or the end of this row just so I know where it is. So I'm going to just call this end of 2-column row, just to keep myself organized. So then after this, I'm going to go ahead and create a new table. And I'm going to give that a class of row. I'm going to go ahead and open that up to work inside of it here. I'm going to create a new table row. Within there, I'm going to create a new table head. I'm going to give this table head tag a class of small 12 and large 4. So that way in a 3-column, 4 plus 4 plus 4 is 12. So at that large size, we'll have a 3-column grid. I'm going to set this to being columns first. So that first one's always going to go to the left. Open this up. So within this table head tag, I'm going to create a nested table. So I'm going to create another table tag. I'm going to create my table row. And then create my table head tag in here. And then within here, I'm just going to create a new paragraph tag, and I'm just going to write, I'm going to turn this into left aligned text here. Okay. So once I have that, I'm going to save that, and you'll see I've got, here's 1 column. So then I'm going to go ahead and copy. I'm going to go ahead and copy this whole table head class. So starting at table head class 12 small I'm going to go ahead and copy that whole thing. After the end of this table head, I'm going to paste it in. And then I'm going to, what I'm going to do is remove that first class, so that way this one ends up towards the center, and I'm going to change this to read center align. Don't worry, we'll put in the classes for the text align in there. Center align text goes here. Then after this table head, I'm going to go ahead one more time, paste that in, and change this class to being columns last. And change this to reading right aligned text. And save that. And you can see, once I've done that, now I have my 3-column grid over here. So this turns up into being 3 nested tables inside our row. So here's 1, 2, 3 nested tables. The first, middle, and last. We don't give it a middle class, it's just first and last. So last goes to the right, first goes to the left. And that will give us this 3-column grid. So the last thing I want to do or to show you is how you can align some of your text. So there are, you can align text with the text equal or text dash X, so left, center, or right. that'll apply to the class of the text. So by default, everything is going to be left aligned. So, but even though it's a default, I'm going to go ahead and add it here to our left aligned text so you can see what that looks like. So class is equal to text left. And that will, by default, you already have left aligned text, but that will left align the text. So for our center aligned text, I'm going to, within that paragraph tag, I'm going to say class is equal to text center, and that will center align our text. And then with my right aligned text, I'm going to give it the class of text right. I will save that, and you can see that that has centered that text. So if I wanted to give it another line of text just so you can see what that looks like, I can paste that in here. You'll see that center aligns it. Copy this one more line so you can see this left aligns, this center aligns, and this will right align your text. So left, centered, and right. Let's go ahead and change more text so you can actually see that that's right aligning. You can see there, that's a little better example. You can see left, center, and right. So that's a way you can align your text with the elements. All right, so let's do some basic image work for our eBlast. So first and foremost, when you're working with some of your images, you're going to need to create an images folder to work in. So I'm going to jump ahead into my, let me just open up, here is my foundations folder that I downloaded. So this is the index file that we are currently working in. So we're going to need a folder within this root folder that says, okay, this is where I'm going to store my images. That way I can go ahead and upload those images to my mailing client. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new folder, and I'm going to call it images. You want to have all those in a correct spot, that way it makes for easier bookkeeping later on. So there's my images folder. So now that I have that created, I'm going to just go ahead and jump onto a site called Unsplash. So if you just go to unsplash.com, there are a lot of beautiful free photos he generously donated. It's always good if you use this site to go ahead and attribute the photographer to that. So I'm going to just jump on here and I'm going to find a cool photo. I really like this Starry Night one. I'm going to go ahead and click the download, and I'm going to save that file. Great, that's in my downloads folder now. So let me jump out here. There it is. I'm simply going to drag and drop that into my images folder to use for this. So there's that Casey Horner Unsplash. Let me grab a couple more images here just to work with. It's a very nice city photo. Save that one. And one more. I like this boat. That looks nice. Go ahead and download that as well. I'm going to pop all of those into my images folder, just so we can have something to work with when we place those in. So I'm going to jump back into my my basic design here. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to work with placing an image in. So I'm just going to leave all the stuff I've already done, and I'm going to start another row. So I'm going to go ahead and comment out, there's that end of that row for my 3-column row. I'm going to comment that out so I know where it is. So my end of 3-column row. There we go. And then right after that, I'm going to just start creating another new table. And create a table with a class of row that is going to hold all my pictures. So I'm going to create a table row. I'm going to create my table head tag. And I'm going to give that the class of small 12. This is probably seeming familiar already. And then large 12. So this is going to take up the large 12. There we go. Columns. First and last. So this is going to take up the whole thing. Go. Open up that table head tag. And then I'm going to nest my table inside of it. So table. Table row, table head, I'm going to create a center tag. It's going to have a data parsed. I'm not going to put anything in there. And then within that center tag, I'm going to place in my image. So IMG SRC for my source. I'm going to find that images folder. There we go. And I'm going to place in that Casey Horner picture. You can use any picture you would like. And then I'm going to just put in some alt text of image. You will want to use alt text that is descriptive to your image in the event that your images get blocked. Align, center, and class of float, center. There we go. And then after this closing table head tag right here, I'm going to go ahead and put in a little expander after it that just gives some space. So I'm going to put in a new table head with the class of expander. Save that. And you see that gives me, that little expander gives me some space at the bottom. That brought in my beautiful image, and it flows nicely in the center, so it takes up the entire width. And you see when these start to break, you can see here's my center text, my right aligned text. When that breaks at that smaller size, it looks really nice on all responsive breakpoints. So that's how you bring in one image nice and centered into your eBlast. All right, so let's work on a slightly more complicated grid alignment. So we've got our nice beautiful image here. Let's do another row that has two images sitting side by side that at the smaller breakpoint is going to go ahead and just stack up picture in picture since we downloaded our 3 pictures. So to do that, I'm going to create a commented out, here's my end of my picture row, but I'm obviously still within my container. And I'm going to create a new table. I'm going to give it a class of row. And within that table, I'm going to create my table row. And then create my table head. And that's going to have the class of small 12 and then large 6. Columns, oops, I'm working within here, columns first. And within there, I'm going to nest my table. Create my table row, my table head tag, and then inside there I'm going to go ahead and place my image. So IMG SRC, checking out my images folder. I'm going to go ahead and grab that one there and save that. And that brought in one picture, so I need to go ahead and nest in next to it. I've got that nice photo, another picture. So still working within the same row. So to get my second picture in, I'm going to go ahead and go all the way up to my table head tag. I could recode all this. I'm not going to, just because this is a lot of HTML already to write. So I'm going to copy this whole beginning table head tag to the end of this table head tag. Copy that whole thing, but still within my table row, I'm going to paste it in. And then I'm going to change from first to last. That way this is going to float to the right. So then this class on the second table head is going to read small 12, large 6, columns last. I'll save that and I'll see that I've got two of the same photos side by side. Looks great. So then the last thing I need to do, I'm just going to delete the that link there for this photo and swap it out and find my other link. There we go, save that. And now I've got both of my pictures sitting side by side. Looking pretty good. To create a button within Foundation for Email that's going to work in most email clients, including Outlook, means that you have to place that button nested inside a table. So to go ahead and create our button, I'm going to navigate to outside these images. Make sure, there we go. Let me comment out here. End of row. And I'm going to go ahead and create a new table with a class of button. And create my table row. And then my table data tag. And I'm going to nest inside of that my table the table row and my table data tag. And within that table data tag, I can create my link here, ahref equals, and I'm just going to place in a pound sign for a placeholder. And I'm going to call that button. And save that. And I can see there that places that button right in there for me, right underneath everything else. So that's the basic generic button within Foundation. So there's some different changes that we can go ahead and make to that button. It's really important to make sure that your button always links to something. So if you have this link, you should have the appropriate web attribute. And if you don't have it actually linked to anything, if it's simply a placeholder, you must place in that placeholder pound sign. If this is blank like this for the link, it will not go through on Outlook. Outlook will go ahead and just kill the whole thing, so it will not send. It'll just kind of ignore it. So make sure that if you're using a button, even for only looks only, that you put in that pound holder placeholder, or the pound sign placeholder. So to adjust the button sizes, we can go ahead and there's some different defaults in there, including a tiny, small, large, and there's also a fully expanded button. So let's go ahead and make some of those. So let me comment here. So I'm going to just comment this out. End of, let's say, default button. And let me go ahead and create a new table here with a class of button tiny. Open that up, work inside of it, create my table row, create my table data tag. Nest inside of that my table that will actually contain the button. So that also has to have all the table parts, so table row. And then my table data tag, which contains my ahref equals, so just put in the pound sign. And then I'm going to call this one button tiny. Save that. And you can see there's my tiny button. So the text on there is a little bit smaller. So for the sake of kind of going a little bit faster with this demo, I'm going to copy and paste. So I'm going to write end of tiny button here so that I know where that is. So because you can kind of see that there's obviously a formula to how these buttons are made, there's the table and a nested table inside of it. I'm going to go ahead and copy this entire button here. So I'm going to copy that. Create a new line here. I'm going to paste that in, and I'm going to rename this one as a small button. So instead of button tiny, this class is going to be button small. Change this to button small. Save that. And there's a small button. So that button small, the text is slightly smaller than the generic button, but the padding is fairly similar. And change that to end of small button. So after that, I'm going to paste that in again, and I'm going to show you the large button. So class of button large. So button large. End of large button. Go ahead and save that. And I can see there's my large button. So if you wanted something larger, a bigger call to action, you can go ahead and use that default large button to make it just generally bigger than what you normally have. So if you want to create an expanded button, so that's a button that goes the full width of its container, you need to add the class of expanded to the outer table of the button and wrap a center tag around the A tag. So let's go ahead and do a button that fits the full width of this container. So after my large button, I'm going to create my table. I'm going to give it a class of row. Create my table row. Create my column. And within that column, I'm going to create my table with a class of button expanded. And inside that table, I'm going to create my table row, my table data, tab some of this over so it's easier to read here. Go. So within that table data, I'm going to create another table. On my table row, and my table data tag. And within that, now I can create this center tag. Set the data parsed to nothing. That's just placeholder. And then I'll create my href, put in my placeholder link. Set the alignment to center. And then the class of float center. I'm going to call this one the expanded button. There we go. And let's save that. And there's my expanded button that goes the full width of the container. So now I've got that expanded button. I'm going to go ahead and clean up a little bit of this just so this is a little bit easier to read some of my tab ordering here, just so you can kind of see where everything falls, because this is a lot of HTML. It's already probably getting a little confusing, so it's helpful to keep track of everything for yourself. That way, because you could see that was a lot of tables. So to go back again, we created a new row for this button expanded, so that way we've got a whole row that this button is sitting itself inside of, and by default we have the table, row, and then so we've got our table for row. Nesting inside of that is a table with the class of button expanded. Then we have another table nesting inside of that, and that's really where this this button sits. So that's a lot of nested tables within there. So it's the problem with the CSS version of Foundation for Email is you end up getting a lot of tables, a lot of table data, a lot of table rows. So it can get a little bit confusing to look at. So after, let's see here. So after this, I'm going to go ahead and put in an expander class because I'm going to show you a smaller expanded button. So let me put in my table data with a class of expander. There we go. Just to give a little bit of space after this button. Okay, so to create a button that only expands on the small size, so it'll be a normal button on the large size, but expands to go full screen on a small size, we're going to use a class of button small expanded. So after the end of this table for class, class button expanded, I'm going to go ahead and create a new table row, or excuse me, a new table. So let me create a new table with the class of button small expanded. Within there, I'll need to create the new table row and a new table data. And inside there, I'm going to nest my table for my button. So create the new table. Create the new table row. A new table data. And inside there's going to be our A, href equal to the pound sign. And that's going to read expanded small only. I'm going to go ahead and save that. And then you can see on here, there's my expanded small only on the large screen. And then when I hit this small size, it expands to the full width. So that's what that expanding small button does, is that default expanded button goes the full width, large and small screens. Expanded small only will only expand to full width on a small size. So depending on how you want your eBlast to be viewed on a mobile device, depends on which class you're going to go ahead and use on this expanded button. To create a different rounded edge or rounded corners on a button, it's simply a matter of adding an additional class to your existing buttons. So you can create what's the kind of pill, they call them pills, just those kind of rounded corners by adding the radius class to a button. So I'm going to go ahead and work with the existing buttons I've already created rather than create new ones. So locate my table, the class of button, my default button, and to change this to be a rounded corner button, it's going to simply have the class of button and then radius. I'm going to save that, and you can see that when this redraws, there's just a slight rounding of the corners there. So if I want to have more of a round oval type of button, I can add in the class of button rounded. So let me go ahead and change that to button rounded. And that's going to go ahead and round that. So, and this also works with the small ones. So if I said this button, if I want to give it a radius, button radius tiny, that just kind of gently rounds those corners. You can see either you've got a real sharp corner, slightly rounded corners, or all the way rounded. So it's just a matter of adding those classes on. To create a menu within your eBlast, you're just going to create a table with a class of menu and then the table row inside of it. So each link has the menu is with table head with a class of menu-item with an A tag inside of it. So to go ahead and create a menu, I'm actually going to scroll. I'll put it towards the bottom. I think that's fine. This is the end of my row. So right in here, I'm going to go ahead and create a table with a class of menu. And I'll create my new table row, table data, and create my new table nested inside of it. And then I will create my table rows. And within that table row, I'll create a new table head with a class of menu item. And in there I'm going to create my anchor, my A tag, which is my href. Just going to set that to be a placeholder link right now. And just type in menu item. So if I want to have multiple menu items, menu item 1, I'm going to go ahead and copy that whole table head tag, just like that, copy it. After that ending table head, I'll go ahead and paste it, make this menu item 2, and then menu item 3. Let's go ahead and save that. And here I can see I have menu item 1, menu item 2, and menu item 3. So that's how you can create a basic menu pretty simply. Ideally, if you had actually had a menu on your thing, it would go at the top, but since this is the end of our handout, that's where it goes. So by default, your menu item is going to go horizontally. If you said, I would like to make my menu go vertical, you're simply going to change the class on table class of menu, menu vertical. Save that. And you can see my menu items are now listed vertically. If you wanted your menu to list horizontally at the large breakpoint and then list vertically at the small breakpoint, so it looks a little bit more mobile responsive, you can simply change the class to menu small hyphen vertical. Save that. So at my large breakpoint size, you can see that this is horizontal, and then when I scroll down to the smaller size, it will change to a vertical menu. So it's mobile responsive in that way. All right, guys, so this is some of the basics of our foundation for email from Zurb. We're going to continue on with a little bit more dealing with the basics and then creating an actual designed eBlast from scratch. So thanks for watching.